It gives me great pleasure to host this book preview. But before I say anything more about the book, I'd just like to introduce our guests here. We have Shilpi Goswami, independent researcher, editor, and curator. Suryanandini Narain is assistant professor of visual studies at the School of Arts and Aesthetics, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. Urvashi Butalia is co-founder of India's first feminist publishing house, Kali for Women, and now heads Zuban, and has been very active for a long time in the women's movement. And Surajit Sarkar works with community and academic archives, pop-up communities, and permanent museums. Welcome, all of you. It's a great pleasure to preview this book, Framing Portraits, Binding Albums, Family Photographs in India. It's edited by Shilpi and Suryanandini and published by Zuban. And this book was very generously supported by the Photo South Asia initiative of the Murthy Nayak Foundation. And the genesis of some of this research was supported by India Foundation for the Arts. In 2020, I believe, Shilpi and Suryanandini came to IFA with this idea to study family portraits and to explore the multiple histories, the micro-histories rather, and the micro-narratives in family portraits. And that's how this project came together, and it's been a labor of love and a long, long journey through some tumultuous times. I think it's important to note that when they started, and they note this in their introduction and also in the report they submitted to IFA, that when they were thinking of this idea of family portraits, it was a time in January 2020 when the country witnessed clampdown on peaceful student meetings at JNU and other institutions, and that is a very disturbing moment. It was also the time that the genome for COVID-19 came out, and then a few months later, as we all know, was the lockdown. So this project has been influenced by these moments in history, so to say, micro history, macro history, yeah, and has evolved from there. And Suryanandini and Shilpi speak about how this has influenced their work. And I'd like to ask Shilpi and Suryanandini, what was the impulse to study family portraits? I know that when IFA made this grant, it was to look at an area that is not often academically studied. So tell us a little bit more about where this impulse started and how you began this journey.
Okay. Having actually taught the history and theory of photography at JNU for several years, I realized that with my students, the most excitement sort of came out when family photos were discussed in class. And it was something that couldn't be ignored. There were long discussions, and there were so many revelations about who we are and what we are doing through this one document of the family photograph. That obviously kind of propelled me to think about this more seriously. The fact that this had been left out of academic discourse as a major resource for microhistories and to study reality at every level was something that was there in front of us. We had to do something about it. And so that and the kind of writing that was coming out in photography wasn't addressing family photos in an exclusive manner. And we wanted to do that. We still want to see the theoretical possibilities that are there for family photos, and it hasn't yet been framed. And then we started looking around, Shilpi and I, to see if other people were doing this kind of work across the world. It wasn't happening here. Was it happening somewhere else? And we came across Family Camera Network. And that was a major source of encouragement and support. They mentored us in this project. Shilpi, would you like to talk about FamCam?
Family Camera Network was a project run by the Royal Ontario Museum and a couple of other universities. For just information, Royal Ontario Museum actually is an associate institution of the University of Toronto. it is an independent, prestigious museum, but it actually functions as an addition to the art history courses or the museological courses. So many people from there, Dr. Divan, who also heads the South Asian collection, she's the curator. Dr. Elspeth Brown, Dr. Tifu. Incidentally, their book called Feeling Photography was one of the key readings that Surya and I individually had taken without discussing with each other. Later on, we realized that we were referring to similar documents that have been in circulation. So the Family Camera Network, they of course deal with diaspora on the Canadian soil. However, the simplicity and the mundane that otherwise gets lost or doesn't get written about is what they started emphasizing on. There was also, because of Dr. Elspeth Brown, because she is a queer scholar, there was a lot of emphasis on different definitions of family when they were conducting their research and project. So that's how at some point of time in 2019 they visited Delhi, and thanks to Surya, we all met for a seminar which was held at JNU at the School of Arts and Aesthetics, and we got a long conversation going after that. Of course, I had previously known Dr. Devan due to some other projects that I have worked on. She is a photo historian. Her PhD and her eventual academic involvement was with the history of photography of South Asia. So in that capacity, I had known her. But this Family Camera Network opened our eyes and gave us a lot of confidence to take this up formally, even while we were discussing with each other as young scholars ourselves. Yeah.
And what was the process of getting you were looking for contributors, you were looking to put this material together. So if you could tell us a little bit about that process, that would be lovely as well.
Well, the first thing that happened was we just wanted to know what was going on. And the best way possible to the both of us thought, both of us thought that we should at least get some scholars, identify them, and get them on a similar platform and hear them out. But initially, we had this who's who of list amidst scholars who are working within the visual histories of South Asian photography. And that's how we started. Very soon we had realized that we need to concretize the ideas, because what happens is ideas get picked up. The problem was that when you are inviting people to speak, you then have to safeguard their ideas. It more than Surya's and mine, it was more to do with if people are bringing in their original thoughts, their ideas to the forefront, then we needed to concretize it, hence the publication, because once it's a published word, it just becomes a little more safe. That's when we took it up seriously, and thankfully Urvashi took my call and we went to her with our project. Of course, she asked all the important questions. And we just wanted to figure out how do we go about it. And to our surprise, she said, why don't I put it up with my editorial board? And that's what jump-started the project very seriously. Because all of a sudden we had her support and her team's support. And that's when we started working on the projects. Yeah. One very important factor happened when we were looking for funding. Of course, we wrote to Tanveer and Arundhati. Tanveer Atsi used to take care of the art research grant before Harshita came in. And Tanveer mentioned a couple of very important things, which the first one was, and which stayed with us, was why don't you want to give published space to new and upcoming scholars? That actually, and that was very seriously put, not as simply as I'm putting here. And that made us rethink about our whole thing, which basically meant a lot of work for us. First, we could not have gone the democratic way of making an open call because it was just Surya and me. And sifting through multiple applications which would come was not something that we could have done. So we had to take a very conscious decision that we have to nominate people. Now, nomination, there was another problem. Which are the communities that you speak with, or which are the scholars that you call? How do you define and justify agency? Because the very negotiation between family archives is extremely political, and marginalized is just one very simple way of putting. But how do you navigate through all of this? So that entire exercise was held along with Zuban's team, and Urvashi was also there. Ma'am, she was there. Ishani. Ishani was there, and they made a couple of comments about which are the kind of representations which should come, and that's when we started looking for scholars. A great advantage is Surya teaches in JNU, so she is in the know of young scholars, people who have graduated or people's friends who are writing about things. So yeah.
Yeah, also it was about identifying people who were already working in the domain of visualizing the family in any way, and perhaps weren't consciously bringing out writing on family photos and to tell them, you have this, just do it. For most of the people in this book, this is the first time they've been published formally. So having that kind of pool of people who started thinking together about the subject in a formal sense was this major activity that we had to do. And in the course of things, and we should perhaps mention now that the IFA was extremely important for the thought process. We came up with 3 workshops for our authors, and this was really something that we needed to do. We felt that this was a pandemic time; nobody was meeting anybody. Archival access, etc., was getting very difficult. How do we actually bring people who had questions about research method, who had questions about how do we deal with this material and so on, to really be able to articulate an essay out of it by the end of it? And it was about 8,000 to 10,000 word essay that we wanted for the book from people. So which is where we reached out to Urvashi, to Surajit, to Sarkar Banerjee to help us with these 3 major workshops. We call them master classes. They were all online, where they were closed door because I think people were very hesitant about the kind of ideas that they had and they wanted to express. 3 very diverse kind of people providing guidance and support about the kind of research that could be done. And then that was followed. For that, I'm going to ask you to please speak about what you did in the workshop. And that was followed by a conference, online conference, where people had the time to develop their ideas after the workshops and then actually present their papers to each other in dialogue in that sense. So that whole 4-part thing was where the IFA really supported us in doing this very key activity to bring the book together.
So Surajit, if you could tell us about, I mean, what I found very, very fascinating is this space that you created, right? Yes, you're all going on a journey to create this publication, but there's also this collective space that you've created for sharing, for learning, for building capacity, for expression, and bringing this research together in different forms. And we'll talk about that later when we talk about the book and what's in the book. But Surajit, if you could tell us a little bit more about the masterclass that you engaged with these contributors, and what were some of the themes and approaches, methodologies that perhaps emerged out of that?
So when Shilpi and Suryanandini got in touch with me about them putting this book together and would I help in doing a master class, my first question was, why me? Like, what have I done? The only thing that I know that is visible in family is this Delhi Memories archive, which we've put up. Has a lot of family photos in it, but it's family photos of families from the city of Delhi talking about the city. But I have never seen those photographs as family photos. There are rare sections in this, but one notices the family at work, and usually, like, okay, so apparently, Janmashtami was a very big celebration in Old Delhi in the early 20th century. But the photographs I saw of Janmashtami, half of them were like out of focus, and you could barely make out what is happening there. Yet the contributors gave these photographs to me. And I'm thinking, okay, there must be something. Either they're giving the whole collection over, or they feel it's important enough and through their vetting process that even if this out of focus photograph is important to give. Which brought me to the question of, so what makes a family photograph worthy for others to see? And like, we've all had photographs taken of ourselves as family members. And I must confess, I never made a very good subject for a photograph. Every time I saw a camera, I used to fidget. And the comment that I heard was from various, it's a Bengali word, Naka. And like, I was like, most photographs of mine, the family albums, people don't want to show because this fellow is Naka. I said, like, seriously? I mean, I can tell you why I was doing that. It's a much better story than anything you guys can ever say. So coming to this masterclass, when they brought the question up, I said, okay, but I'd like to, since I don't know any of the contributors, I'd like to find a way to actually get to know them and kind of develop it in the class. So can you ask them to bring a photograph to the masterclass which is not something they want to show and actually they'd want to throw? That was the rule. And I said, I want one photograph like that, and then we'll take it on from there. So then the masterclass happened, and I don't know what you people remember of it, but I was struck by one thing, that there were two kinds of photographs that I was seeing were throwable. One in which most of the frame was like blank. So something happening in one corner. So, okay, the subject is not making an appearance. There were two photographs over there, three, in which they look completely all right to me as who doesn't know the content of the photographs. And it did not look like the photograph anybody would want to throw, but it was meant for throwing. And I said, okay, that's actually where we should start off. So let's start looking at family photographs, or any photograph for that matter, but family, because we know the backstories of these photographs. What creates absences in family albums? So the first section became like photographs that don't have the subject. But what about these other ones in which there is a subject but you don't want to kind of show? And then you discover about moments in the family you don't want to talk about, or people you don't want to talk about too much. Suddenly that other layer of family dynamics which create a family photograph comes up. When that came up, I had brought a presentation along, which was of many families on a common journey. This was a collection I'd come across from Estonia, which was a lot of, if you remember that, the Estonian refugees. See, Estonia was one of those really sad countries in the Second World War, in which it was overrun both by the Germans and the Soviets. And they were, one of the most famous films in Estonia in the 2010s was a story of a family in which the brothers had to fight each other because they were in opposing armies. So it's a country that's really been devastated. And so there was this shipload of people who were going to Canada, and it's a seafaring nation and all of that. but it was in the height of winter, and it was an awful voyage. It took them 3 months, and like people grew sick, and seasickness was rampant. People lost weight. There was somebody falling overboard. There were about 650 odd people on that journey, out of about 120 families or something like that. It was a set of people who knew each other who were making this trip. And there were some cameras. But the amazing thing is, in that whole journey, when you look at the photographs, you would think they've had a time of their lives. Everyone's smiling, and the kids, and like, there is no sense of the 3 months at sea that actually transpired. So between the need to throw a photograph away and the formality that a photograph imposed comes the whole question of the missing spaces in photographs. And the masterclass has essentially explored the idea of silence. And so then how can you kind of bring it up?
Yes, Urvashi, you would like to talk about your process in your masterclass and sharing that perhaps you observed there.
So quite like Surajit, when Surya and Shilpi asked me to do the master class, I also thought, what do I know about photographs? And I said as much to them, why are you asking me? Unlike you looking terrible, looking Menaka and wanting to forget those photographs, I don't have an uncomfortable relationship with photographs, but I'm a woman of words, right? So it's never the visual has not till recently entered my life in a big way. So I was just thinking, why? Then actually, I think to hand it to the two of them, they saw something that I had not been aware of or seen. And what they said to me was that, can you bring into the class the kind of concerns about writing personal histories that have informed your work? Because this is a similar kind of exercise where you're delving into very close, very intimate relationships, and you are actually bringing material out of there, and then you're representing it, making it public. So then I began to think about that, and also the other aspect of it, which was very important to us when they came to us with the proposal, was how gendered these histories were, how much of a gendered perspective there was going to be. So that's what they also felt I could bring to the masterclass. And I was pleasantly surprised and very moved by the concern that the scholars, and a lot of them were young scholars, one of them actually is somebody who worked with us as a designer, and another one is someone who is an author of ours who's worked with us. And so I also knew them a little bit. And of course, Shilpi has been my student, so I've seen her in that avatar. And Surya's mother and I go for walks together. So there was this kind of intimacy which was outside of the frame in which we were entering. So I was very moved to see the kind of questions people had about accessing family histories through photographs, how to talk to parents, how to deal with the reluctance in families to let certain histories emerge, how to deal with that one hidden history of an aunt or someone with whom something went wrong and there are no photographs barring one, and that photograph does not want to be seen, etc. So how to deal with those kinds of questions, how to deal with the ethics of the research that they were doing, what to do about questions of copyright, that to whom did those pictures belong. So we talked about all of that, and really that was what informed the masterclass. So for me also it was a real learning, because you don't actually connect in your head the knowledge you may have with something you see outside of that sector. We think in silos. And that's when I was saying yesterday, reading your projects, how I could see the connections. This is what this exercise did for me. So I, in the end, was really grateful to them for their insistence. And really, I think they saw something that that I didn't see because I was too close to it.
Thank you, Urvashi. And I'll come back. You want to say something?
Yeah, I do feel compelled to mention three more names.
Yes.
One is Sarnath Banerjee. Everybody kept on asking me and Surya why
Why
a
Sarnath?
graphic, why Sarnath? Sarnath's sensitivity towards the middle class, the mundane, is phenomenal. There are certain things that he sees which normally we tend to miss. I have deeply benefited from his books, his strips, and that was the time when Mint Lounge was bringing out a series of his works on the middle class of Delhi. So when I had a conversation with him, he was more than happy, and he was able to bring out the animation. I don't know if I'm conveying it correctly or not, but the animated part, which normally gets to be seen as dead, to be seen as lifeless in old family photographs. Sarnath was able to bring that life out in many ways than one. And two more names which we are deeply indebted to is Professor Tapti Gohan Thakurta and Professor Malvika Karlekar. Professor Karlekar was one of the first few people who wrote about the visual histories of the personal space of family. She was the first reference we ever read as young PhD students. And Professor Thakurta, I think she just, in spite of being a trained historian, and that is what she did for most part of her life, but I think her scholarship just transcends space, time, and every continuum possible.
Yeah.
And they have been very generous with us because they were observers. And their critique became so essential, all of their critiques, all the five of them, their critiques, because we had nothing else to fall back on, Surya and me also, and of course the authors. So their critique became very essential in fine-tuning ideas which turned out to be formal writing.
Would you like to now speak about the sections and the contributors and what people will find in the book, different thematics?
Yeah, so the 21 essays, so we decided to make 8 sections, and each section is a thematic one, and we use the prefix re
I just need my computer.
for everything over here, because we were essentially re-looking at the family photograph, re-looking at its possibilities. These are documents we all live with, and we are suffused with this kind of banal attitude towards family photographs, and they're just everywhere and they're repetitive and they can be boring when it's someone else's family. But this was a kind of looking again at that family photograph for hidden potential. So Shilpi just mentioned the first 4 thematic sections, and then I'll do the rest.
I'll just read because this is too many complicated things. So the essays in the book address the absence of the family photographs in the academic discourse in India and dwell on their importance and visual omnipresence in our daily lives. The aim of this anthology is to analyze family photographs for the contribution they make to the histories of photography and the marginality and the family in India. While studies on family photographs from South Asia are very limited, there has been a significant international scholarship in the domain. The essays in this volume can be organized in 1 minute. Can be organized in various ways, and no section is exclusive of the other. The 8 categories dividing the essays are fairly narrow, addressing the texts partially rather than holistically in their central thematics. So their ideas and arguments overlap with each other, resonating with common experiences. I shall introduce the first 4 categories. In the first section, titled Families Reimagined, Post-Memory and Intergenerational Dialogues, Ajay Salunke, Annalisa Mansukhani, and Dia and Jayanti Datta have been brought together for their intergenerational dialogues that enliven or reimagine the family through photographs. As a well established narrative around personal photographs, this reimagination entails multiple personal views about the timing, contexts, and meanings that photos bear, often appearing as variable in each narration. All these essays, all the three of them, focus on the maternal figure as the subject, the narrator, the proprietor of the family photographic archive, while also dwelling on the irony of loss and absence amidst the familial plenitude. Photographs recall absences and instability in the next section on migration, displacement, and diaspora, titled Families Relocated Migration, Displacement, and Diaspora, where the motherland, so to speak, comes into question. Adira Thekubitil has an active project going on with the Anglo-Indian archives that attempts to retrieve histories, genealogies, and kinship connections across time and continents. And she writes from that collection. Migration and displacement are usually accompanied by the loss of memorabilia, such as photographs and their associated history, as illustrated by Aditi Gupta in her essay on the memories of partition of 1947. The culling together of previously lost archives is again seen in the essay by Sarojini Lewis as she returns to her roots in Suriname to uncover the politics of gendered histories from the region of the indentured laborers, who were her ancestors. Intersectional identities of sexuality, class, and caste centrally condition family photos and their narratives in the third section of the book titled Identities Regendered, Sexuality and the Family with Charan Singh and Hardik Brataviswas, directly addressing queer and feminine subjugations and visual countermeasures of subversion. The fourth section titled Ties Reinvoked, Archives Reimagined, Borrowed and Lost, the Lost and Absent Archives makes a stronger appearance with stories of displacement casting long shadows across generations. Nadia Nureyestan inquires into a dispersed Iranian community through photographs she accidentally discovered at home, while I, Shilpi Goswami, dwell on the irretrievability of personal history when photographs have not been taken at all, or lost, or worse, when they have been purposefully misplaced or destroyed.
Okay. The next section is titled Families Recalibrated, Visualizing Class and Caste Hierarchies. And here we had specifically the Dalit identity surfacing through family photos, surprisingly not centered around a caste identification in the photograph itself, but the oral narratives around those images that could contextualize it. Then there's identities, there's Divya Gauri, who spoke about framing domestic servitude. She's done a whole PhD on the figure of the so-called servant in colonial India, especially through painting. So this was an essay looking at photography in contemporary India, looking at that, servant figure with a very deliberate use of that term, not out of choice, but out of circulation. Jai Singh and Rajashri talk about when I start photography, I start with my family. And in their essay, we also noticed why several other essays too had to be a dialogue. It wasn't just one person writing about someone else's collection, but very often a kind of back and forth, which we encouraged our authors to come out with in the writing itself. So Dia's work was a dialogue with her mother, and both of them became co-authors together in the process. And it wasn't intended, but that's how we thought that the narrative came out in its fullest sense. And Vijay's work on his own photographs that his mother was very keen to take, considering that they were in difficult financial situations and personal situations. But the photograph again is that point of hope that keeps a family afloat. That came out in Vijay's essay. The next section is Identities Recentered, Negotiating Ethnic Margins. And this is where we look at religious identity. So Uzma's larger project is on all sorts of visual and material cultural histories of Aligarh. This was something she was already working on for an Al-Ghazi grant, and we requested her that, you must do the photography part for our book, and she did. And this was also looking at just families with their albums and their interconnections that came forth when Uzma interviewed them, who is related to whom, and doing that kind of very complicated genealogy of a modern Muslim identity in Aligarh. There's Anna Charanamai. She's actually currently doing her PhD at JNU on the same thing that she submitted an essay on, and that was this kind of the unrest in Manipur, and it is so relevant today. And here is a young scholar who's witnessed it through all these decades of turbulence, and she actually contributed in great difficult personal circumstances. It was hard for her to write, but she was committed to the project, and she gave a brilliant essay. Ranu Rai Chaudhary's really important essay on Charbendu Day's work, and Charbendu's here, was to look at artistic responses to identities on the margins. And is it possible to reimagine another kind of visual possibility when a community lives on the margins? And is that kind of intervention something that through creative possibility can make us see something else? And this was also the only twin essay in our volume. Charbendu actually had a critical response to Ranu's essay. And we felt that this was a really brilliant dialogue, and thank God there's a response somewhere. It's not just one way with some author writing something about someone else. So Charbendu has an artist's statement that's been tacked on to Ranu's essay, and it's a very interesting thing to read both together. The seventh section is on belongings and albums revisited, visualizing materiality. Chinar's essay, and here we actually kind of changed the tone. Chinar and my essays are about happy memories that people have, and which can also be slightly weird because she looks at the point when people buy cars and they have to have that family photograph taken at the showroom. And what that kind of means personally to her through her example, but also as a moment for the family when we acquire a different kind of financial aspiration or something, and that really articulates the family itself. Malika's thesis is a larger work on family photographs, especially foregrounding women who were making family albums, wielding the camera as amateurs. So her work is also something that comes from her thesis. She's especially looking at albums from Kerala and from Bengal. Why isn't this moving? Sorry, one sec. I just need to swipe. Yeah, okay. And then, of course, there's my essay, and I just wanted to look at women who want to go on holiday and what are the kinds of pictures they take when they're on a break from domesticity. And I just found that domesticity just followed them anyway, and they had to look after children and cook and do all those other things even while they were on holiday, whether the family photos reflected that or not. And the last section is on politics rearticulated, familiar responses to state positions. Now, this is again a subject where other essays could also have been pulled in. These essays were really kind of fluid. They could be categorized under various sub-themes in these 8, but we just had to settle with one version. Deepti and Ruchika talk about the uprising of Chiasi, which is also up here as a project, and looking back at what family narratives were from the photos back then that revealed or concealed actual political fact of what was going on, kitchen stories and things which were oral narratives which were not formalized. So this essay allowed them to document that kind of parallel history. And Jigisha Bhattacharya's very important essay on the anti-CAA protests and the kind of photographic documentation of the women sitting on protest over there with their families and children. So that's basically the kind of diversity that the book tries to contain within itself. It was it was huge. We also never anticipated covering so much ground. We never went looking for, oh, caste pe aise hona chahiye, queer identity pe. We didn't try to plug every hole, and there are several gaps. Still, I think there could be a volume 2 and 3 of other kinds of family photos we have not been able to cover. But we were surprised by the sheer diversity of writing on photography that is possible, and the tone, the language, everything. There is nothing very uniform about this book, and the fact that people had so much to say in terms of detail and really particular observations, which we're very grateful for, really.
Thank you, Surya. Thank you, Shilpi, for taking us through what's in the book. We look forward to it releasing soon. And I know there were a lot of challenges. And just to say that all of this is happening through the pandemic. The workshops are online, the conversations are online, people are isolated, archives are, like you mentioned, archives are inaccessible, and the diversity of stories are really something. The diversity of also expressions, how they're presenting each of these thematics and topics. Urvashi, I'd like to turn to you. You did mention what excited you about this work, but I was just curious if you could share for our audience. It's a very diverse range of writing on family portraits and photography. So what was it about this collection that excited you and Zuban to take up the publishing of it? And we're very grateful for that as well.
I think many things. One is that the book came to us, or the idea that Shilpi and Surya brought to us, came at a time when Zuban in its journey was actually looking a lot at the visual. We had been looking at works of art, we had been looking at graphic works, and moving from publishing just a text to publishing books which combined text and the visual. So this was, the perfect sort of thing that came into it. The other was their enthusiasm and their commitment to it, and just the fact that they were both so excited about this, and both were so open to listening. So, my first feminist question to them was, how many of the authors are men? Not that I don't like male authors, but, and if we are going to look at this book, then there has to be a gender dimension in it. And they reflected on that, so they were very open to listening. I also really liked the fact of the ways in which the book was collaborative in a wide range of ways. IFA came into it, the Murthy Nayak Foundation came into it, JNU was involved in some ways, etc. So it was like, it was a collective enterprise which fit in very well with what we were doing. And the other thing was that the authors, writers were all young, and Surya and Shilpi were very open, although they did not want to tick the boxes that, but they were very open to understanding that you cannot have a book like this which only looks at elite families and which doesn't go beyond that, etc. So all of those things were exciting for us. But I do want to mention something that people here might not know, because books are often seen like those murtis which pragat ho jate hain na, so it's like they just appear in the world. But the process of putting a book together is a difficult process, and this book was a nightmare. And it was a nightmare because, when you look at trying to, so the first draft of essays comes, and they come in a Google Doc, and then you start reading them, but halfway through, the authors will decide, no, I want to revise that draft. So next draft will come. Then the essay comes in yet another Google Doc with all the photographs, which have not been captioned, which have not been numbered, which have not been in high res. None of the authors has followed the instructions to stick to the style sheet that has been sent to them, to not submit color photographs, to submit high resolution photographs. So it's a constant, fighting that battle. And poor old Shilpi is organizing things, and she's hearing the irritation in my voice and saying, "No, ma'am, it's okay. I will send you the next file." So that process just goes on and on. And you reach the final stage of actually, finally, all the photos are in place, finally, all the texts are in place. That's when you discover that some of the authors do not have bibliographies, and they are now not willing to write them. So, so what do? You have to take a call on that also, because for them, the work has been done and finished and handed over to you. And there is an expectation among writers, because nobody is familiar with the mysterious publishing process, that no matter that they will take a year to produce a great piece of work, when they hand it to the publisher, they expect it to come out tomorrow. So then there's this impatience you're dealing with. When is the book coming out? Work is getting old, etc., etc. All of that. They are getting the flack for that. We are not getting so much of it. But there is a moment in the life of the making of a book when all of this starts to turn. And that is when it starts to become a reality. And then other kinds of excitements come in. So when you actually start seeing it take shape, that's when it gets really exciting. We sent this book for copy editing to one of our really valued and best copy editors. She took 2 months longer than she would normally have taken, but she fell in love with the book. And then she kept writing to us saying, "I love this essay, I really like that essay." And I was thinking of that when you were looking at the community of people who entered with like IFA and others, who came in, helped you, all the people, Sarnath, Tapati, etc. There's this other end, where there are people who are hidden, invisible, rather in the way of photographs that do not get seen, who actually are falling in love with the work that you've done. And our editor, at the time that she started work on the book, she had just got married. And this book was kind of pulling her away from her husband because she wanted to keep getting back to it. So in a sense, we were also dealing with that. These are the stories that you don't hear about how books get made. And finally, our typesetter, who is a wonderful man from Kerala called Joji Philip, who thinks that he is part of Zuban. Okay, so he doesn't charge us much, and he says, "Oh yeah, we will do this book together," etc. Then Joji put it together in the form in which it came, laying out the pictures and all of that. And then he also fell in love with it. So now this book is kind of collectively owned by everybody who's on this side of producing it.
Biggest cooperative society we have built unknowingly. It really became a biggest cooperative society. There is an entire community which came to help us. Not only in terms of this, some Urvashi specified, there are innumerable scholars, our colleagues in the field, whom we seeked advice from at a personal level. Surya must have done that. The list is endless. So that's what I was reflecting on when I was speaking to you last night, that how do we even thank those people? It's unbelievable how many people are required to help you produce something which is genuine. Thanks for
Yeah, and also you told us, one day they said, "We'll bring this funder to your office." And they arrived with Vasant from the Murthy Nayak Foundation, gave him information. Oh, the mic is gone. Yeah. No, I'm just saying, one day they did everything. They arrived with this funder at our office. They brought him along and told him about the book. And while he was sitting there, he said, "Okay, I'll give you the money for it. Give me a budget and I'll give you the money." And so we gave him a budget and he funded the publication. It was as simple as that. So
Similarly, IFA, because that one part was editorial was taken care of by Zuban and us in whatever way we could. And of course, a generous amount was given by the Foro South Asia and Murthy Nayak Foundation. And IFA was a different thing. I called Tanveer, and I didn't know him personally. I called upon him and I just made a phone call and said, there are these authors, we are in the middle of pandemic, there are no government endowments or bursaries where I can apply to. I need to pay our authors. However humble or modest the amount will be, there has to be a payment. It is absolutely unethical for taking a contribution without making a payment. I thought it must have fallen on deaf ears, to be very honest. After about 3 or 4 days, or maybe a week, he came back with Arundhati, who was the previous executive director, and she said, Shilpi, we can't do it, but we can organize an online conference. It will serve two purposes for you. One, all the ideation which you have been having will formalize and it will take shape. Secondly, there will be an honorarium which we can pay towards. So that's how we crowdfunded the book, literally.
No?
No, I mean, I also wanted to, so many people, I didn't know the other end of the work that's going on. I mean, there's a lot that's gone into making of this book. I know that I'm sure the audience also has questions to ask, so I don't want to, take this, but I just wanted to end with something I think I've also asked you, and in this book as well, when we talk about portraits and family, and who is the family, and you had mentioned that the pandemic kind of gave us that sense of being isolated, having families, but there were also perhaps different kinds of families, right? So if you could just, perhaps we will end with that or how would you respond?
Surya, what?
Yeah, I mean, actually, this comes to the introduction of the book. The book didn't have the intention of not having any sort of theoretical claim, but I think that is what we ended with. Now, looking at the way the essays were written, their richness, their diversity, the way the family had been reconstituted in our own heads for being so many things, we realized that this is a book just launching this work into the world. It belongs to everybody equally, and we couldn't have that kind of tight framing of the family at all. So unlike the portraits, which are actually framed, or albums that are bound, this book is about unframing and unbinding the family from the kind of social conceptions that we have, the kind of presumptions we make about it. So hopefully the book will reveal a lot to us about ourselves. And we left the introduction as something that was very open-ended, that didn't go into deep sociology about framing the family in a certain way, because the book is doing exactly the opposite. And I think it is an archive on its own. I think when we do archives, Surajit, that is what we do. We give it to the world to start thinking about something that they wouldn't have otherwise, and re-evaluating something that we cannot anticipate on anybody else's behalf either. So yeah.
I would just like to add one small point. I would just like to add one small point. We had to, unfortunately, take certain key decisions. Like one very important question that IFA did ask us was, how do you define a family? What are you trying to do about it? Organizational family is also family. Unconventional families are also family. For our own simplification, we just went by the most conventional sense of how individual authors understood families. We left it to them. We did not try to put any regiment or any kind of a thought process into their heads. I would also like to mention the two essays that got pulled out.
Yes.
For no fault of theirs, for no fault of ours, but both the papers were from Kashmir. And unfortunately, we have a lot of respect for them. The papers were actually almost ready. And one of them was brilliant paper. But that's when we realized, and I think it hit me very hard, that was the first time I realized that there is a thread just by a published word in a book about history of photography, which otherwise you do not even think. Art histories are on the margins in this country. You don't think it will be that important. And when I requested them to reconsider it, that's when Urvashi told us, let it be.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we can't mention their names because that's what they prohibited us from doing. They said that even the mention of our names could become very serious because you don't know how word travels. That's how inherent the fear is. I had not ever faced it face to face earlier prior to this.
Thank you for sharing that, Shilpi. I know it was a difficult moment in the editing process, for sure. So I'd like to throw it out. Urvashi, would you like? Oh, before we throw it out, would you like to mention when this book might be coming out?
Yes, sure. We are releasing it on the 6th of January. Right now, all we have is a dummy. And that's another little story that when we asked the printer to make the dummy, because the spine was too large. When we asked the printer to make the dummy, so there are lots of funny stories that go into the making of a book. The spine was too large. My designer hadn't quite adjusted it to the exact size. It was too large. She had approximated it, but it ended up being 150 pages more than the book actually is. So the printer decided that he would fit the book to the spine and not the spine to the book. So what we have now is just a dummy, which is blank inside. But the book will be actually 150 pages less than this. And we'll release it on the 6th of Jan. And I think if we can manage it, we will price it at 1,200 or 1,250, something like that. We're trying to not price it higher than that. And if any of you wants to buy it, say you were here and we'll give you 35% off.
That's lovely. And from what I'm hearing from what all the readers who've already looked at it and from your end as well, I'm sure we're all going to fall in love with this book as well. And perhaps it'll take us away from the other mundane things in our lives. So I'd like to just throw it open to the audience if you would like to ask any of them questions on the book, on their process, on their work, on the workshops.
There's somebody there.
Maybe this is the book already, but there's a very good project in Goa about family portraits, and they showcase this every year at the Serendipity Arts Festival. It's a very nice way of talking about centuries, decades of Goa history. So, is that in the book, or are there other city-specific projects in your book, maybe Bangalore or anything?
Goa Familia we know about, and there are other initiatives all over the country that are there. But we knew that these were projects that were growing simultaneously with the book. But that is more of an archival project as such. We were looking at individual contributors who wanted to talk about the material they had, essentially, and
Academically. It was meant to be an academic book.
Yeah,
that we were very clear about.
And somehow we didn't have anyone talking about that project then. I think it was still being documented and conceptualized at that time. It's come a long way in 5 years, which is how long the book has taken. So, and I keep saying that, Shilpi, there's going to be a volume 2 and 3. There are many more projects on family photos we have not addressed, and there's so much outside of it. So yes, and I'm very grateful to see that kind of work happening, people responding to family photos.
There's somebody there.
Thanks so much for this. I'm glad that you answered, or rather brought up this issue of maybe there should be a volume 2, because so many ideas. I just want to share something, if I may. It's about photographs from my family. I come from Kerala and Malappuram, and my family was involved with the freedom movement and particularly with the Mapla movement. And I remember my grandfather and my granduncle were both involved. My granduncle was one of the key people in the Mapla movement, and he was in prison for 14 years, accused of waging war against the British Queen and such like. I never met him. I don't have a memory of my grandfather either. But I would look at these two photographs of the, both my grandfather with his wife, with my grandmother, granduncle with grandaunt, and their brothers. And I would ask other people in the family about them, and they would talk about, he was in prison, he was in 14 years, and all the sort of things that he dealt with. His wife wrote to Gandhiji and tried to get to this thing and all that. But what was interesting is my granduncle, and this photograph was taken after he comes back, is looking this way, and my grandaunt is looking sort of down, while my grandfather and grandmother are sitting physically very intimately together, which is unusual for that time, 1925 or somewhere around that time. And I would ask about it, and like my mother would say, their relationship, especially after he came back from prison, was so sort of, broken that you could see it in the photo. And I found these sort of things very interesting, and I've used some of these photos in courses that I've taken, where I kind of put these two photos and I ask people, what do you see and how do you see the relationship? And it's very interesting for someone who's not even know the people, can look at cues. And I find that of particular interest in the thing. So I'm really looking forward to your book and sort of looking at cues that may or may not be there.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you
for sharing.
Anyone else?
Good afternoon to all the panelists. Thank you for that. My question is to Urvashi ma'am. So we all know that society expects women to sort of, they identify women to carry culture forward. Like if you see in weddings, it's okay for men to dress up in suits, but women are expected to dress traditionally. And they are expected to sort of carry the values and everything. So this is a very macro perspective of how society views women. How do you deconstruct the norm in a very micro level, like let's say family? How do you then, how do you engage in that conversation?
Actually, maybe you and I should talk about this outside, because it isn't a question that's directly related to the book, right? And this is really Shilpi and Surya's show. So, I'll respond to that. If you don't mind, we'll just, after it finishes, we'll just talk outside. Is that okay? Yeah.
Hi, I am also someone from Kerala, Malappuram, and me and the other person who are currently working on an IFA project, we were planning on another research work focusing on family photographs, but taken in the Gulf diaspora. And the important aspect of it is that it is always inside an apartment or a flat. And another aspect of it, as she mentioned, like she has a lot of family photographs from 1920s and all. But at the same time, living in the same region, my father's side doesn't have that many photographs, owing to like the religious aspect of it, I don't know how to say it, like a kind of distance towards the new technology or religious aspect of portraying oneself or any other forms of representing a human body and all. At the same time, my mother's family, who were more in an urban area of Malappuram, has a lot of photographic history. And when it comes to my parents taking photographs, we see a mix of these both sides. My question is, in the book, especially there is a theme on diaspora, relocating families and all. Are there any works focusing on how these photographs look at spaces that they've been taken in, whether it's houses or, where the family spend the time?
Yeah. Yeah, I think locating photographs. Actually, I'd like to answer both questions. What we discovered through the book are the multiple methods through which family photos could be analyzed. If you want to take the gender perspective and look at how women are dressing, men are dressing, why is that something that is making us uncomfortable or culturally observant about a gender difference? This is something of Now, is that something that is already there in the photograph, or is this a cultural inscription or expectation that we have? Who is it that is making meaning of that photograph is important. Similarly, locating that picture. Is it an archive where you found it, or is it an album, or is it somebody's house, or is it something somebody's discarded? That kind of location of the image, especially the materiality of the image, becomes very important as well. And we've had everyone speak about that kind of access to the image. Is it something someone hides in a wallet or something, or is it proudly on display in a drawing room? Very much so. It's there in the book, in several essays trying to analyze.
Another part to it, the erasures that happen. In family albums, this is what we have observed. I have observed in my family albums, and I have observed in most of the family albums which were partition stricken, because the erasures were not always conscious, but at times they were conscious, which I came to analyze and realize later. So the erasures and how you make those choices. Surajit and Urvashi's individual sessions, day before yesterday and yesterday, touched upon it very beautifully. Please do look at that from that angle as well. That why do those erasures come? It will help you maybe articulate it better.
Yeah. Firstly, I want to say congratulations on the book. Really, really looking forward to reading it. I'm also from Kerala, but my question is not related to Kerala. When we started the discussion, you said that in the context of India, there isn't really a theoretical framework for looking at family photographs, especially, or an academic framework. I wanted to know if you felt like this is a good start, and if in any way you plan to continue with this direction of academic work. And also, how was it in working with scholars, especially young scholars, to frame their work in this particular context? Did you use any theoretical frameworks from within the Indian context, or were you looking at other contexts and applying that? It would just be interesting to know.
You just heard Urvashi.
Yeah, well, the theoretical framework is fairly difficult to come to. Now, the family is something that's been analyzed deeply by sociology, urban studies, all those other disciplines have dealt with it. History,
psychoanalysis,
all of that. And we were aware that they were inflecting our research also. Researchers there are some essays that are heavily theorized already. And, because that is the kind of readership that's been there, that's the kind of awareness that author has, or that academic training. Now, the other one, where somebody else may not have any theoretical reference at all. They don't know of Bath or whoever. So we worked with both kinds of people, and I think we've just wanted to have these essays emerge, and then maybe at a later point come up with some kind of theoretical response. But at this point, I don't think we could have had an overarching kind of theoretical framework for all the essays together. We didn't attempt that, really.
Even in the future, I think we all grow, as scholars, and we both have grown a lot with this. Again, as I said, that we ourselves have had observed, how do you define the gaze? How do you put a parameter to it? Post-colonial theory or post-memory, it is not just one linear way of thinking at things. What we did ensure as editors was, whatever thoughts these people were bringing, all our scholars, all our contributing authors, to help them put that into a publishable format. That's when the disasters were happening. Because naturally, we thought that 8,000 to 10,000 words is a very handsome word limit. We were bombarded with 20 to 25,000 words. So it was very difficult to cull out of that, but that's what happens when you start writing. So we did not very consciously put a regimen to it, as I have repeatedly mentioned to many of our authors. And in the future, I don't think so either of us are of the personalities who will. But yes, as editors, you do have certain responsibilities that the thought or the academic thought gets across as beautifully as possible. That is a responsibility we had to take very consciously. Apart from that, nothing more, really.
If I may just ask a follow-up question, just obviously we haven't seen the book and I don't really know the essays, but from what you've described of the book, and perhaps there isn't this kind of categorization for the book, but would you look at it from a sociological perspective or is it a visual studies perspective?
It is a visual
It's
studies.
a visual studies.
It is a visual studies.
I think it's interdisciplinary.
It is interdisciplinary. After a while, it becomes interdisciplinary, but it is largely within the visual studies parameter.
Because it's photography.
It's photography. It is as visual and stark as that.
Shilpi, just one question if you
Yes.
have time.
Yes, please.
You've been talking about, of course, we are all very curious to see the book when it comes out and think about it.
In our research, also we have taken recluse 2 photographs to try and see basically visual culture, yes, clothes, etc., and prints, visual culture, and all of that. But that's not my point of question. When you speak about
volume 2 and volume 3, etc., possibility of these books, I'm already imagining the kind of reverence that we had when we stood in front of camera, say 50 years ago, my parents, my grandparents, or at weddings and all that. And today, I seem to be using my phone more as a camera than a phone. And so there is a certain sense of irreverence to being photographed. I mean, I think once in a week, I'm just simply editing all the pictures that I may have shot, in a restaurant or food or, in the kitchen or garden and all that. And how much junk, because there is a possibility of editing that we are doing, and then we are leisurely editing it out. I mean, what do you and your authors have to say about this whole irreverence to the medium of being photographed? I wonder if I want to study my photographs that I have taken on the phone 5 years down the line. I just feel it's junk, and why did I waste my time doing so? So, is that how everyone thinks? I'm just curious.
Well, I can't speak about other authors. I can speak about my family. My larger family do not really care about the photographs. My grandmother, my only living grandmother, who was my maternal grandmother, just one day handed over everything that she had to me. And she said, "Ye to," I'm just transliterating it in Hindi. She speaks in Bangla. It was like, either इसको दीमक खा जाएगा या इसको फेंक देंगे रद्दी में. तुमको अगर लग रहा है कि ठीक है, तुम ले जाओ. It was as simple as that. And my grandmother is a very sensitive person. I mean, she is a voracious reader even at this age. But similarly, my father, of course, there is a much more complicated history to his life and all, but he is left with only 3 photographs. It's the most ironic part. I was a photo archivist of one of the biggest collections of South Asian photography. So I don't know. They probably thought it was junk. They probably thought it was not even immediately important anymore. But that is where my interest in the absences happened much more than what was visually available. But this is my personal journey as a scholar.
But to continue the question, like say for instance in Bombay, we have one of the oldest studios called Studio Hamilton.
Hamilton
And
Studios.
They have such a terrific archive.
Brilliant.
And in those days, people used to go as families to get themselves photographed, etc. Today, with all the means that we have, none of us as a family, for say the 25th anniversary or a wedding and all, we don't feel like the need to go to them. Why? This whole business of being photographed as a family thing doesn't have any much value as it used to have then. So, are there any thoughts on that?
Well, it's more to do with the change in the digital processes and the access, I think. Also, the expenses, to the best of my understanding, earlier everybody could not afford to have a camera at home. It was expensive always. Photography as a profession till date is very expensive. Ask all these photographers who are sitting here. So, but thanks to the phone, we don't need to go, because whatever the studios did, we ourselves do. So I don't think so there is a need to go to the photo studio. And even our phones also double up as photo albums. I use a fairly comfortable phone which has organized it has taken away the load from my head. It has organized year wise, month wise. So I don't think so there is any need, or even geographical location wise. So I don't think we feel the need to go anymore. There is
Yeah, no, I think this glut of images that's coming out because of digital technology is something we're dealing with in every regard, not only the family photograph, but any sort of photograph. But I think the way we can reflect on it is just to see what we experienced during the photographic moment. What is it that we are doing? Instead of being there in the moment with the family, we are compulsively just taking pictures, and everybody is doing it. It's not one camera. If it's a birthday party, at least 6 of them are taking these pictures. And that is with the anticipation that we will look back, at this moment in the future. So it's like creating the past for a future moment in the present. It's a very complicated thing that we're actually doing. But I think somewhere it has become habitual. It is something that we are doing because of a certain compulsion. And the thing that this book will hopefully do is to redeem the photo from its excessive sort of space, or this banal sort of existence that it has. Oh, there are hundreds of pictures in my phone, why should I look at it? I hope people look at it more because they've read it.
I have one thing to share, because the conversations that have been happening have raised this memory in my head, and the second part is a little bit of a question. So I grew up in a family. My father had run away from his village. He never had any photographs of his parents, of his house. My mother's family migrated or were refugees from Bangladesh, so they didn't have any photographs. I didn't grow up with any photographs of, it's as if I started this idea of taking pictures. So this whole connection to the past that we depend on through stories and through photographs is something that always makes me pine for something that is missing. So that's just an observation. But my question, because again, I think as everybody said, we're all waiting for the book. I don't know, and you said it's about visual culture, but does it also have visual art? Because in recent years, a lot of young artists have started working with family archives. I head a gallery in Kolkata, and one of the artists we represent, Arpita Khanda, has been working a lot on this area. Her series is called The Memory Collector, and I think she's had a session here earlier with Urvashi as part of it. So I just wanted to know whether that is also something that you have looked at within the book.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, I think between the earlier question and yours about this excess of images and then the complete absence of images, Shilpi's essay is exactly on that. This loss of the memory of a family, the history of a family, because there are no photographs. What do we do to somehow redeem that history for ourselves in this generation. I think the impulse to archive, and both Urvashi and Surajit have said that this generation has that impulse, which is far greater, perhaps because of the digital, that we want to archive our histories.
Ease
in a
of
way,
technology has helped, yeah.
Definitely. So, so that Shilpi's essay will actually, she's looking at the same region also as you mentioned, and photography as art. There's always the aesthetic potential. That is always there. What is to say that a documentary photograph will not be something that can speak to someone aesthetically from a fine arts perspective? In fact, it is family photographs that are becoming art now. So that transition of what a photograph can do and mean in different disciplinary formats is fascinating, and I definitely think there's a lot there. Why not?
There is one particular essay by Ranu Roy Chaudhary.
that
She
actually
looks at Sharbendu De's one body of works amidst many of his. Sharbendu is right here today. His is his is the only artwork. They are art. They are created pieces. Of course, Imagined Homeland is the series of his works, which was also exhibited at Serendipity Arts Festival a couple of years back. That is the most direct thing. Other than that, we have looked at the visuality of the photographic narratives around it. I hope it answers your question.
I just wanted to respond to the previous question. Actually, just little bit I know of the process. That very little I know of the process.
By the way, she is one of our contributors. She's Chinar.
But I was thinking that the reference that you talked about with photography, I don't know, me as someone who was born in the late 80s would even understand what that means, reverence. So our relationship with photography is not of reverence. That's not a word I would use, but it is not of irreverence for sure. To put away something, not look at it, is not because of irreverence. It's just our relationship to photography has shifted so drastically, and it continues to shift, and we use photography in so many different ways. So for example, I would take a picture and put it on Amazon reviews, because I think, this is gonna, I need to, like I say, photographically now post a review image. So I am making use of images, constantly working with them, thinking through them in my other interaction with the world, with the web, with the internet, and so on and so forth. It's just that experience that you spoke of that one really important photograph that you are to take, and that will become the memory. It's just that kind of a reverence. I don't think so we have the reference to, at least we can understand it. And there is a shift now. And that shift, probably the book, in so many ways would be trying to, I think, also address, I assume. Thank you.
Hello, hi. Thank you for that. When you talked about absence, I was just wondering a little bit about, the absence of a subject, because a lot of times situations arise when somebody who is either more enthusiastic or, somebody goes missing in a photograph because of the person taking it. So could you share a little bit about situations that you heard about through this process? Yeah, sure.
So, I feel like to have a unanimously approved story around a photograph is really rare. We all have opinions on the photographs we get to see. Even if it's a photograph that was taken 3 minutes ago and at a lunch, and people take 2 photographs and then you start looking at it, invariably somebody will say, what is this face this person is making, usko hatao. So photographs are kind of slices of life that everyone is looking at in a very different way. And let's not forget that. So when you, from that aspect, if you start looking at the whole notion of absences, then it makes total sense that there should be an absence, and then it's up to us to figure out what is missing. And the use of you know, if it's like about some human exchange that's happening, and if it's a human exchange and we are all human beings, we have a sense, a kind of common sense, that what should have happened. So it gives us some idea of, I don't see anything about this part of it or that part of it, and that's where your questions can kind of begin from. I mean, I'm being very broad because every photograph is a different story, so you really can't make a clear schema for it.
No, one of the reasons I asked that is because in comparison to the times when it was an event and you used to go to a photo studio, you know there is a dedicated photographer. But the times afterwards, like when with the advent of the digital camera times, let's say my father is one of those people who will think that this is a happy memory. You know, this is the time to click the photograph. And he was the person who used to go missing from those photographs most of the times, or end up having duplicates and then somebody else goes missing. So that relationship also changed over time. So I was just wondering, like, how does that come into play when you look at a family portrait and the father or, somebody else is not in the picture because he may be the one taking it?
I think it's a great question because it opens up a larger question about exclusion or removal. Sometimes you don't want to remember people, and we've had these. It's not directly in this book, but I've had conversations and seen instances of people being cut out of family albums because there's a divorce or something. You don't want that person there. Or there's some reason why you want to remove that person who's also been photographed, but now you don't want them. The removal of entire photographs, albums where images have been plucked out. What do you do about that kind of loss? The photographer's absence, and the cover of this photograph of the book actually makes a lot of sense. Nobody would know about who is in this image. There is a grandmother and a granddaughter, and the mother, the in-between generation, is taking the photograph, and this is nobody other than Dayanita Singh, the baby, and the mother is Noni Singh, and then there is her mother in it. So 3 generations in that image, 2 of them famous photographers. The fact that had it not been the mother behind the lens, the baby wouldn't have looked up. That too, you see, the photographer becomes really important to extricate the gaze from the subject. How do you get that going? And I think that desire surpasses the desire for the photographer to also be in the frame. They have to direct this drama of a family. These are 2 people, sometimes it can be 20 people. How do you get everybody to cooperate and smile and be nice and all of that if you aren't somebody who is close enough? So that kind of dynamic of the photographic moment is something that's very exciting, and it's a real production. It's so theatrical.
I think also, there's a comment there on what families do to their members. So if you were to look at family photographs, let's say of the early 20th century or even the mid 20th century, you would never see the widowed aunt, because she would be really excluded from there. And then there's also things about if you see family photographs at the time of partition, the recovered woman who has been abducted or sexually assaulted is always excised from the photos. The family doesn't really, there are not that many of those, but, and also when you're talking of the photographer, or when you mentioned who runs around to take the picture, I mean, now we have Photoshop, no? So you can just actually wipe people out or add them into technology also, I think, somewhere.
This actually reminds me of a time where my sister, on one of her visits in the recent years to my maternal grandparents' place, she photoshopped the image of my grandfather's parents together, and in their lifetime, they had never been photographed together. And in my grandfather's lifetime, he'd never seen them together in a photo. So now there is a frame which has them together, and this is kind of how he spends.
Yeah, Vivan Sundaram did that, no, with his family.
Yes, I was just saying. Retake of Amrita, Vivan Sundaram's prolific work, where he reimagines not only Amrita Shergill but also her father Umrao Singh Shergill, who was a avid photographer at that point of time and quite well educated in terms of photography. He had self-educated himself. Vivan's one whole series, Retake on Amrita, is dedicated to what you're just mentioning. And he did it before the digital age, actually. He did it before the digital age came in.
And I just wanted to add something because we're talking about Photoshop and erasing people out. And when I attended the conference, it kind of like brought this memory back to me where a family member who's divorced and has
a child, and the person is estranged, did cut
the husband's photo out. But today we put smileys when we want to obscure someone's face. She would cut flowers from greeting cards and fix it on the photo. So when you see the photo, you see the mother and the child and a flower.
Collage.
And a collage, So it was a very, and it's really interesting because it's what memory does the child have, and then when the child grow up later to reconnect with the father, it's like there are no pictures with mother and father or those memories. So it was that it threw up that memory when I attended the conference.
Just one thing. Like connection, photos sometimes reappear.
Yeah.
And they reappear after the death of one of the people in that photograph. And I've had photographs about my mother in a part of her life I knew very little about. And I was always kind of confused because whenever I talked about Central India, she never responded. And I'm very curious, I never imagined she'd ever gone there. After she died, 6 months later, or a few months later, a cousin came and suddenly I'm seeing photographs and a family album I've never seen before, which apparently was in the house. And she's in Pachmadi in 1948. And I'm saying, good Lord, where did this history appear from? So
I'm from Cuttack, Orissa. So I just wanted to say a small thing about the photograph thing that मेरे जो grandfather थे पिताजी के side, so his first wife passed away. That is so he had two children, my Jethu and PC, and then my father's came. So my Jethu till the last, he was in a big position in cell, died with this regret that he didn't know how his mother looked because there was no photograph of her. There are pictures of everybody else in the family, the second wife, and my father was from the second wife. So I think in this perspective, till the end he used to tell me, I don't know how my mother looks because she died when I was very young. I just wanted to share that.
My grandfather lost his mother. Of course, this is pre-partition. He lost his mother very young. She died at childbirth, like it was a phenomenon then, it seems. He had a painted picture of a lady. He did remember her because he was 14 when she passed. So I asked him once that, so Dadu, did your mother look like this? No, I don't know who this woman is. Who everybody thinks is my mother. She did not look like this. Whether that was his memory or whether that some artist did a very botched up job in that photograph, God only knows. But that's how everybody in that family, and every sibling had a copy of that very picture. It was very funny.
I think we should do
A lot of thoughts keep crossing, but to keep it in response to the presence of a photographer while taking a picture, yes, it's true that the photographer in many occasions is not physically present, but then there is a presence.
Exactly.
It's a lens. If it's fine, then the presence is obvious. What we need perhaps is this ability to read, which many have generally, but if an artist or photographer is absent, then how do we read their presence? Does that need a certain kind of a lens? We have been talking for quite some time about this. I keep thinking, and Surya and I over breakfast we were talking about the same, and I was sharing this. What does a book like this do to photography in our part of the world, where photography
still is very scattered and random and just not getting institutionalized. We don't have set publishers who would want to look at critical discourses within photography, but yes, coffee table books from a publishing point of view, or it just doesn't make enough money. How does a book like this that critically examines the work of photographers, I think in the coming years it might have a ripple effect of setting up some sort of an ecology where it's an ecosystem that's being devised. The photographer doesn't feel completely left out in some ways, but also doesn't feel that I can do whatever I want to, because there's no institutional mechanisms to put the checks and balances. We think of an art review in some magazine, but a critical book like this also at some point is like, with the hope, okay, maybe someday my work might get reviewed and get into a book, which also means a larger lifespan for the work. Even within the post-colonial discourse, and that's where Shilpi and I keep talking about, and that what gives me a lot of hope is what a book like this does. Does it stand as a counter to the Western narratives, their way of looking at us? Why are we not looking at ourselves and our stories? And we have always been saying that until we start telling our stories, the tale of the lion is always going to be glorified by the hunter. And this is where I see personally a lot of hope. Beyond, I mean, it's great that, okay, you both brought in my work and Ranu wrote about it. I'm grateful about that. But beyond the self, what does it do? With a larger vision for a photographer or an artist in our part of the world to also survive and grow, we also need an ecosystem. And I think something wonderful has happened with this is that it starts to build an ecosystem.
Sharbindu, first thing, either of us did not recommend your name to Ranu. Ranu made the decision herself, which is why for a very long time I did not know that you were a part of the book. And it came as a shock when I was like, okay. But thank you for your kind words. But this book, apart from all the funny part, made us realize the serious horrors of pursuing serious research and academics in our country. It is not a joke. I come from a publishing background. I've been very lucky to have studied under her and to have been trained. My first job was at Leftward Books. One thing that job taught me was how to bring out a good book in shoestring budget. That is one thing which that job really taught me very well, very early in life. But not everybody is as lucky. So not everybody is as pragmatic to take this thing on. That's what I was discussing. We have discussed it amongst ourselves and discussed it with other people in the field also, that so many ideas just get lost. So hence we have immense gratitude for all the help that we received in terms of guidance and in terms of collaborations and in terms of funds and infrastructure.
In terms of what this book does, one that remains to be seen. It is just a beginning. And as we were saying, that term, the afterlife of the book now. What will it do for family photographs? We want to see it. We need to see that response. Does it talk back to Western theory? I don't know. A lot of people in this book have actually evoked Western theoretical models already, and we can't stop them because it speaks to their work and what they are looking at. You know, this is photography theory has been written about by Western scholars for years. And I think only in the last decade have we had all these, readers that have recently been coming out. I think Chinar and Eileen did one, and then, there have been subsequent ones as well. So I think we're at the very beginning of actually theorizing photography in South Asia. We are at that moment. Photography has
just
not
started owning up to the agency. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a start.
It's a start.
It is a start.
It's a start.
But thankfully it's a start.
Yeah. And then there's photography as fine art, which started appearing in the whole museum circuit, etc. in the 1990s. But this is not that. This is even more, regular, everyday kind of photography, everyday aesthetics, which is totally not been looked at all. So this book, I think, is a first look and presentation of what is there. as material, and then I think we have to go further from this. We need to look at our own work again later on to say, okay, what is it that we can actually read as consistencies, or something that we can read as a theoretical possibility. We need to revisit this as well.
Thank you, Shilpi. Thank you, Sue. I think we'll close because we're running out of time. But thank you so much for sharing, and I think that's a lovely note to also stop, to close at, to imagine what this book is going to be, and to imagine what the future beyond that is going to be as well. Thank you so much, Shilpi, Suryanandini, Surajit, for sharing your process, sharing the journey behind this book. Also, thank you, audience, for your very engaging interaction and for also your reflections. I think a lot of us shared very personal stories, so that's what I think the book is also going to evoke and perhaps spark other writings. So we'll see where that goes. So thank you, everyone. Thank you.